If you are looking for distraction, it's easier than ever to find. 90% of the time we check our devices, it's because of an internal trigger. How many times can we complain about the technology distracting us before we do something about it? If you don't control your attention, absolutely someone else will.
Today we have a very special guest, someone who has spent years studying the intersection of psychology, technology, and human behavior. He's an expert in behavior design and habit creation. He's the best-selling author of Hooked and Indistractable. His work has influenced many in Silicon Valley, but has also empowered individuals, people like us, to take back control of their time and focus. Today, with digital distractions at an all-time high and the attention economy shaping the way we work, we live, and we connect, there's no better time to have this conversation. So I'm thrilled and super excited to interview today Nir Eyal.
My pleasure, Kenneth. Great to see you.
So you're the author of two of my favorite books. I have to say they have been essential for Opal and also my personal understanding of not only how companies design these products, but also how people can take back control. So super excited to speak. I just have a kind of opener for you, which is, how did you get interested in this subject? And why did you want to dedicate so much of your work and life to this?
Let's start from the very beginning. I think there's always a childhood trauma at these kind of stories. So my childhood trauma was that for as long as I could remember, I was fat. Like not just overweight, but obese. I remember my mom taking me to the doctor, and the doctor had this chart, and it said, okay, here is normal weight, here's overweight, and here's you. You're in this red zone. You're obese. And I remember really struggling with my weight and struggling with the power that food seemed to have over me. And I think that was probably the genesis of my fascination with how products shape behavior, because that I was kind of looking for answers of what was it? It wasn't just the food. It was the way it was packaged, the way it was marketed, how persuasive it was. Of course, the taste played a role. And then what really fascinated me, I think, was how my emotions played a role. I mean, the way I got control over my weight was psychological as much as it was physical. And I think we see the same exact thing playing out today. When you talk to people who are overweight, and if they're honest with you, as I'll be with you honest right now, is that, even today when I struggle with what I eat, if I overeat, if I sometimes lose control, it's not because I'm hungry. It's not because the food is delicious. It's because I'm eating my feelings, right? That's the honest truth. And whether we eat too much, drink too much, smoke too much, scroll too much, click too much, fundamentally, we are trying to escape discomfort. And so that's been kind of a common thread throughout my research and from my own fascination, right? They say research is me search. And so I was really trying to figure this out for myself. It was a very personal struggle. The good news is that unlike a lot of other people I'm sure you've talked to over the years who are tech pessimists and kind of these chicken little people who tell you, every technology is going to melt your brain is the worst thing ever. My experience was that I was able to overcome these distractions in my life, and that was very empowering and kind of shaped who I became. And so I've always looked at it from a positive perspective. That to date, I've never seen a distraction that we can't overcome, as long as we plan ahead. I'm kind of skipping to the end of my decades of research. I think if you were to summarize everything I've done over the past 20 years, it would be summarized with this mantra that the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. That fundamentally distraction is an impulse control problem. It's not that you're morally deficient. It's not that you're a bad person. It's not even your ADHD. I also have ADHD. It's not that. It's simply that you haven't learned the skill set to deal with these impulses in a healthy way, and so you try and escape them in an unhealthy way. So that's kind of the super long story of how I got into this field.
Yeah, no, wonderful. This is great. And thank you again. This is a story of, empowerment. I think will inspire many that are watching this video. And also we try to be, optimistic and offer solutions. So this is a great segue into this. And, let's get straight into it. I think you talk specifically in your latest book, Indistractable, about being indistractable as, I think you say, the skill of the century. Why is that?
Yeah, because it's the macro skill. You go into a bookstore or you look on Amazon and you see all these books that can give you so much information, and nobody can sit down and concentrate long enough to read them. Okay, well, that's too long, right? Let's go on YouTube. We'll watch YouTube videos. I mean, look on YouTube. You can learn how to do anything and everything from coding to cooking. You'll learn it. Most of it's free. But who has the attention span to watch, right? So the problem today is not like any other problem we've had in the history of mankind, because up until just a generation or two ago, information was scarce, right? I remember when I went to college back in the late 90s, we looked at colleges based on how many books were in the library. Like they would literally publish, our library has 100,000 books. Our library has 200,000 books. Like that was a big deal. Oh my gosh, so many books. It's irrelevant, right? Who cares? It's a waste of money. Because today we're drowning in information. That's never happened before to the history of mankind. So that abundance of information has created this scarcity of another resource, which is the scarcity of attention. So if you don't know how to harness that attention, if you are not in control of your attention, you do not choose your life. So whether it's your physical health, whether it's your mental health, whether it's your career, all of these life domains require you to be able to choose how you focus your attention. And if you don't control your attention, absolutely someone else will. And you will look back on your life with regret. That's what this is all about for me. Big picture. It's about minimizing regret. Because what I found in my own life was that I'm not one of these people who says, oh, video games are bad or Netflix is bad or social media is bad. Any of this stuff is fine. There's nothing wrong with any of it. And it kind of rubs me the wrong way when people say, oh, you shouldn't do this. You don't play video games, but it's okay that I watch golf or basketball on TV. Like, what's the difference? There's no difference. Whatever you want to do with your time and attention is fine, as long as you do it according to your schedule and your values, so that you don't look back a day, a week, a month, a year, a lifetime later and say, why didn't I use my time the way I wanted to? So if you want to spend your time doing those things, do it. Play video games, watch Netflix, go on social media. That's great, as long as that's what you decided to do in advance. Again, the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I think you mentioned, the sort of great explosion of the quantity of information available out there, and I think that's something that is very both, fundamentally true and also that people don't necessarily notice, right? Like every month that goes by, there's more information, there's more social media, there's more videos to watch. Just a kind of a anecdote here, but when I started my career at Google very early on, when I was 19 years old, and at the time, Eric Schmidt was CEO, and there was this slide that he showed people called the exponential of information, and kind of showed that like, information creation was like an exponential curve, that more and more, there's more and more information available every single year, but no one thought about at that time, who's going to read all this, like who's going to actually process information, right? And I think here today, many years later, we're at this point where people are saturated with information. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. But to put that in perspective, uh, this has always been a problem. So I'm not sure that. I mean, it's interesting from like a data management, data storage perspective, but from an attention perspective, it's not necessarily the amount of information. But the reason I brought up information is because is to show how it's no longer a scarce resource. That your competitive advantage today used to be what you knew, right? And then it became who you know. And now I think that's not the case anymore, right? For the baby boomers, it was about what you know. So go to college so you can learn information, because that's where all the information is. Then I think for the next generation, for my generation, it was about who you know. It's about access to getting to the right people. But now with social media and the fact that everybody puts themselves online, you're getting the top tips and secrets from people who want a public presence. You're getting, like when venture capitalists or startup founders or these people are putting information out there, like you're getting more information than you probably could over many dinners together with them, because they're putting all that information. So who you know is actually becoming less important. I think now the skill of the century, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's how you learn. This is the skill of the century. If you are the kind of person who sits there sclerotic and saying, well, my job is my job, I am what I am, and I'm going to sit here and do my job the way it's always been done because that's what I went to college for, you're going to be roadkill. You're dust. right? The future will be owned by people who don't sit in classrooms and expect to be spoon-fed information. It's going to be people who are curious enough and have the focus enough to be able to turn that information that we're drowning in into wisdom. That's going to be the skill of the century. And to do that, to be that kind of person, my favorite word in the English language is autodidact. Autodidact is someone who teaches themselves. The people who are going to succeed in the future are the people who are autodidacts. Now, with the dawn of AI, you have to be the kind of person who can quickly learn and adapt. But you cannot do that if you're constantly going 30 seconds with this and 30 seconds with that, and then and your brain is all over the place. You have to be able to focus your attention long enough to turn that information into something practical.
Let's get into the practical details. How does one acquire this skill? I think you've built a framework.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so let's start with what is distraction. Let's start with definitions here. So the best way to understand what distraction is to understand what distraction is not. What's the opposite of distraction? If you ask most people what's the opposite of distraction, they'll tell you it's focus, right? I don't want to be distracted, I want to be focused, but that's not exactly right. If you look at the origin of the word, the opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. When you put them next to each other, it makes a lot of sense. Traction and distraction, they're opposites. Both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And they both end in the same 6-letter word, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do. Things that you do with intent, things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction, distraction, is any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, further away from your goals, further away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So this is really important, okay? Because it's not about the activity itself. We need to stop vilifying and medicalizing using social media. It's fine. It's not, that is not the problem. It's not the technology. It's when we're doing something that we did not plan to do in advance. So anything you want to do, play video games, watch Netflix, go on social media is fine as long as you plan to do it. Now it becomes traction. And conversely, just because it's a work-related task doesn't make it morally more virtuous. Okay, I'll tell you, for years, I would sit at my desk, I would get to work, and I'd say, okay, now I'm going to do my big important project. I'm not going to get distracted. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm just going to do that task. Here I go. I'm going to get started. But first, let me check some email, right? Let me just check the company LinkedIn page. Let me just check Slack. Let me just do this. It's part of my job. I got to check email, right? It's part of the job, right? What I didn't realize was that is the most dangerous form of distraction because it tricks you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy work at the expense of the hard and important work you have to do to move your life and career forward. So just because it's a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction. That's the most pernicious form of distraction because you don't even realize you're distracted. Okay, so anything that you did not plan to do is by definition a distraction. Okay, so now we got traction, we got distraction. Now, what prompts us towards these actions? We have what's called triggers. We have two kinds of triggers. We have external triggers. This is what you'll be familiar with. These are the usual suspects: the pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things in our outside environment that can push us towards traction or distraction. But studies find that although they are part of the source of distraction, it's only 10% of the cause. Only 10% of the time that people check their phones is it because of an external trigger. So what's the other 90%? 90% of the time that we check our devices, it's not because of a ping, ding, or ring. 90% of the time we check our devices, it's because of an internal trigger. Okay, not an external trigger, an internal trigger. What's an internal trigger? An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety. This is the source of 90% of our distractions. Okay, so distraction is not a moral failing. There's nothing wrong about you. You're not a bad person. It's simply you haven't learned this skill to deal with distraction in a healthy way that moves you towards traction. So you try and escape it with distraction. That's all it is. So now we have our framework. Now we have these 4 steps that we can use to become indistractable. Number 1, master the internal triggers. I promise you, I've tried every product out there. There's lots of good stuff out there that can help you. But fundamentally, if you don't deal with that internal trigger, you will always find a way to get distracted. If it's not your phone, it'll be the television. If it's not the television, it'll be the newspaper. If it's not the newspaper, it'll be a book on the shelf. You'll taking out the trash. Something will distract you if you don't feel like doing the work. So you have to figure out how to master those internal triggers, or they will master you. Next is to make time for traction. This is where we get into time boxing and why time boxing is way better than to-do lists. To-do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity. You have to learn how to make time for traction, because if you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it is distracting you from. I'll say it again. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if it's not on your calendar, what did you get distracted from? Right? Everything's a distraction unless you plan for it. Okay, that's how you turn distraction into traction. The third step is to hack back the external trigger. So this is where we get our hands dirty. We make sure that our phone is indistractable. We use tools to hack back these external triggers so that they serve us as opposed to us serving them. We hack back meetings. We hack back email, all these ways that we can hack back all these external triggers. And then the fourth and final step is to prevent distraction with pacts, which is where we make some kind of promise, some kind of firewall against distraction, so that when all else fails, we are protected and we don't have that temptation to do something that we didn't plan to do. So with those 4 steps, master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, prevent distraction with pacts, anyone can become indistractable.
So let's talk a little bit about the internal triggers. I think there's obviously probably the obvious thing for people is, the pings and dings, as you mentioned, right? So like, let's put these away and let's see what happens. But obviously there's a deeper story here, which you're talking about. This is kind of this internal struggle. Where can people start?
Yeah, so the first place to start is to bring awareness to that sensation. So the problem is that we love easy answers. All right. We love villains and good guys, bad guys, and we want to just blame the device without actually thinking that, look, the data shows that it's only 10% of the problem. We have to think of the deeper cause. And the deeper cause of 90% of the time is this discomfort. So if you can simply bring awareness, so in the book, you can, you don't have to buy the book to do this, but if you can start keeping what I call a distraction tracker. You can get one on my website, Near and Far too, if you want it's a little worksheet that basically what you're doing is when you get distracted, as soon as you can potentially catch yourself, what you want to do is to ask yourself, what was the preceding emotion? Okay, I wanted to work on this big project, and yet I'm checking sports scores. I meant to make my sales calls, and now I'm checking email instead. Whatever the case might be, what was it that you felt right before that sensation? Boredom, loneliness, insecurity, fatigue, anxiety. What was that sensation? Because every every distraction only has one of 3 causes. Either it's an external trigger, one of those notifications, ping, dings, and rings. Either it was a planning problem or an internal trigger. So if you can say, okay, what was it of those 3 things? Now you can take steps to prevent it from happening next time. Incidentally, Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote, one of my favorites. He said, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So how many times can we complain about the technology distracting us before we do something about it? Right? Back to what I said earlier, that mantra of the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. If you plan ahead, if you take steps today, there's no distraction you can't overcome tomorrow.
And by the way, we'll have the links to the books and the various workbooks here in the show notes. Definitely really encourage everyone to check it out. It's been really helpful for me personally. I want to touch upon self-compassion, motivation, something that you've talked about a little bit. It's not worth blaming yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about the science behind that? Why is it that we need self-compassion?
Studies have found that self-compassion that it is one of the most defining traits of who can stick with their goals over long periods of time. That people who offer themselves self-compassion are much, much more likely to meet their higher order objectives, to live the kind of life that doesn't require them to regret bad decisions when they give themselves self-compassion for when they screw up. Because what people who don't reach their goals do is that they think that there's something wrong with them, right? We call these the blamers and the shamers. The blamers blame things outside themselves. It's my phone, it's my boss, it's my kids, it's all this stuff out, it's the news, it's Donald Trump, it's Twitter, it's all this stuff outside of me. That never works because that stuff's never going away, right? There will always be junk happening outside of you that makes it difficult to stay focused. Then the other people are the people who are called shamers, right? They don't blame the stuff outside of themselves. They shame themselves, right? And this could be overt. I'm no good with time management. I'm easily distracted. I'm this. I'm that. It can be more nuanced. I have ADHD. What are you going to do? I have ADHD. I can't focus, which is completely not true. I also have ADHD. That's not true. We can absolutely focus. But if you throw out the baby with the bathwater, if you say to yourself, well, there's something broken about me, I'm incapable, you never take the steps to learn the skills to overcome that problem. So you don't want to be a blamer. You definitely don't want to be a shamer, because what happens with shame is that the more ashamed you feel, shame is a very uncomfortable sensation. So when we feel shame, what are we likely to do to escape that shame? More distraction, because it's a very uncomfortable sensation. So we don't want to be a blamer. We don't want to be a shamer. We want to be what's called a claimer. A claimer claims responsibility for what they do in response to a trigger, right? An uncomfortable emotional state. Okay. Not the emotion itself. This is a very important discrepancy. Emotions and feelings are not the same thing. People talk about them the same way, that an emotion is a feeling. That's not true. An emotion is a physiological reaction. You do not control your emotions. You don't control your emotions. All you can control is your feeling. A feeling is a psychological interpretation of an emotion. So a claimer claims responsibility not for how their emotions project themselves, right? You don't control that. It's like saying, if I feel the urge to sneeze, okay, I don't control that urge. I already felt the urge to sneeze. I don't control that urge any more than I control the urge to check my phone. Okay, that's not in my control. What is in my control, what I can claim responsibility over, is how I will respond to that emotion. Am I going to sneeze all over everyone and make them sick? No, I'm going to take out my handkerchief and I'm going to cover my face, because that's the responsible thing to do. So by becoming a claimer, by claiming responsibility for what we do in response to those emotions, this is how we begin to master those internal triggers, by offering ourselves the self-compassion that even when we fall off the wagon sometimes, even when we mess up, I still mess up from time to time, and I wrote the book Indistractable, but you have to give yourself the self-compassion to realize that this is a process. This is something that we build the skill of. So when things change in my life and all of a sudden, I travel or my schedule changes around, yeah, sometimes I get distracted. But just like that Paulo Coelho quote, I don't let this problem happen again and again. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So I take steps today to prevent it from happening again and again tomorrow.
So this process, as you mentioned, it's a long journey, right? And
Right.
also requires people to have self-compassion, because in order to stay on this journey for the long run, you must have a certain amount of self-compassion. But I want to talk a little bit about something else, which I think you have a counterintuitive opinion on, which is the concept of flow, which is highly popular, right? I think you're not a fan of that concept. Do you mind just talking a little bit about this?
So it's not that I'm not a fan of the concept in general. I'm not a fan of the popular interpretation of it. So flow, and for that matter, habits. I think habits are way overrated, even though I wrote a book on habits. Because flow and habits, flow, just to back up. So flow is this concept that was written about in the book Flow by a guy by the name of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And the idea was that there's these magical states almost that people get in when time seems to disappear, that you kind of become disassociated with time and space in a way. You get into this magical, flow zone type of reaction. And people have, I think, misappropriated that work to think that they can magically get into flow whenever. Okay. Just the same way you hear people talking about habits. Whenever you hear people talking about forming a habit, you can basically substitute that to mean there's something I want to have done, right? I hate exercising. I want to have exercise. I hate writing. I want to have written a book. I hate meditating. I want to have meditated. So people think there's some magic autopilot button. Ooh, push the button, now you have a habit. Push the button, now you're in flow. It don't work that way, folks, okay? The definition of a habit is the impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. If someone could please tell me how I can write my books with little or no conscious thought, I'd love to hear it. There's no such thing as a writing habit. It doesn't make sense. Those two words don't go together. Unless you're doing stream of consciousness, I have no idea. How do you possibly not think while you're writing? How do you go to the gym and try and break a PR with little or no conscious thought? No, that's not right. It doesn't work that way. So what people need to do is to understand there's a difference between a habit and a routine. A habit is an impulse to do behavior with little or no conscious thought. Some things can become habits. But all habits start as routines. What's a routine? A routine is a series of behaviors frequently repeated. Not all routines will become habits. Very few of them will ever become habits. Some of them can become habits, but very, very rare. Almost never, ever are the behaviors, the routines that are difficult. Okay, and the same applies to flow. There is no way that I'm going to get into flow doing my taxes. I'm not going to make taxes doing my taxes. You know, you're in France. You're lucky. In America, we have these awful tax system where it takes us hours to do our taxes. It's a pain in the ass every single year. You're not going to get into flow or make a difficult task into a habit because that is the antithesis of the definition. Instead of habits, instead of flow, we need what's called deliberate practice. Okay. Deliberate practice is about focusing our attention. It's about being fully present. It's not expecting to make the task easy and make it effortless because it ain't going to be effortless. That's just a different expectation. So why do I get angry about this? Because when we tell people, well, just get into flow or just make it into a habit, they try it for 20, 30, 60 days, some magic number that doesn't exist. And it's still not easy. Exercise still sucks. Writing is still hard. Starting a business is still really difficult. And so what do? Do they blame the guru that told them about this? No, they blame themselves. They think, oh, I must be broken somehow. I must be deficient. It's not that you're deficient. It's a stupid methodology that's deficient. So instead of trying to escape the discomfort for things that are never going to become habits, things that are never going to go in flow, we need to lean into the discomfort. We need to learn how to master those internal triggers that we were talking about earlier so we know what to do with the boredom, the loneliness, the fatigue, the uncertainty in a healthy way.
I want to zoom out a little bit. One of the things that artificial intelligence has done is it's made content arguably better, right? It's made the TikTok For You page, the social media content is arguably more customized to and more personalized to capture people's attention and potentially change their behavior. I wonder if this changes your view at all about external triggers versus internal triggers. Is it possible that external triggers become so good that it changes the fundamental framework here?
I never want to say never. I'm very skeptical that it would take the same form factor that we see it today. I can't envision a future where a YouTube video is so good you can't stop watching it. I can't envision, a notification on your phone is so good you can't help but answer it. We see what happens. We flood people with notifications and they stop checking. Not only do they stop checking, they turn off notifications and uninstall the app if we bother them too much. So, it's much more likely that we will bombard people with too many messages and the messages will be so good we can't resist. So I'm not worried about that part. I mean, short of, Neo plugging into the matrix with some kind of barrier that some kind of technology that bypasses the blood brain barrier, I don't really see that coming. Now, I do think, and this is already here, that if you are looking for distraction, it's easier than ever to find. So if you don't know how to deal with emotion, you're screwed because the algorithms have gotten so good at figuring out what you're feeling and what you're trying to escape faster than you know, so that when you turn on the television, it's not, we say algorithms, but, Fox News understands what makes their audience react. CNN, BBC, I mean, legacy media, the New York Times have gotten more polarizing. They've become because they know what attracts their market. They knows what makes you click and what makes you tick better than you understand yourself. And of course, when you put that on a mobile phone and you at the hands of TikTok, they absolutely will tweak that algorithm to figure out what you're going to like. Now, as scary as all that sounds, it's a joke compared to what we can do. Right? We have so much more power. And I know we're very simpatico about this, where, the biggest problem in my mind is not that the tech companies are making products we like to use. right? I call this the Dunkin' Donuts problem. Dunkin' Donuts are delicious. Okay, I love them. They're real. Oh no, let's change this. Let's make it the croissant problem because you're in France, and you bastards make the most delicious croissants in the world. And every time I'm in France, I gain 5 kilos because those damn croissants are so delicious. Now, am I going to walk into the baker and take him by his collar and say, "How dare you, Pierre, make such delicious croissants? What are you thinking? You've hacked my brain to make delicious croissants." That's ridiculous. I should stop eating so many damn croissants. And that's exactly what's happening with this technology. The technology is supposed to be good. That's why we have it. Are we going to tell Netflix, "Hey, Netflix, stop making such good programs. I like to watch them a lot. Apple, your devices are so user friendly. Quit it." That's stupid. Like, we want these products to be engaging. So a much easier solution than waiting for these tech giants to do something and waving our fists and complaining at clouds: install Opal, right? Like, do something about it. There's so many tools out there. Learn how to manage your emotions in a way that they don't get the best of you. Become indistractable. And part of that is using these tools. Many of them are readily available. Most of them are very inexpensive. They're just waiting for us to utilize them. I think that's a much better route than waiting for these companies to become less habit forming.
I love it. Take agency, take control. And this is obviously something, appreciate the shout out, but obviously it's something that we really care about. And we've found, by the way, for people using the app as well, right? Like, the feeling of agency and is very important as well. Keeping it maintained the long run, having motivation the long run to, when you were saying, like you were saying, right? Like, bad things do happen. Like, you will fall off the wagon. You will go and eat that croissant, or maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4.
Yes, it sounds like you've been over my shoulder watching me eat those croissants.
I've been there too. So I wanted to ask you just one kind of closing question here,
Sure.
which is, you wrote, 2, I think, very important, at least very important books. If you had to write a third one, what would be the next book in the saga?
Funny you should ask. I am working on my third book right now. It's due in a few months, and it's about the power of beliefs. That it's kind of what we've been circling here. I became very frustrated that so I do these office hours every week. Wednesday evening, I have an hour of my time that anybody who's read my book, free of cost, calls me up. You get 15 minutes. Tell me what's going on. I'll try my best to help you. It can be about either of my books, whatever you want to talk about. And most of the time, it's I've done this, but I'm struggling with this. How can it be a little better? No problem. I love it. They love it. It's great. Every once in a while, maybe like 1 out of 20, I'll get a call that sounds like this. "So I read your book and it didn't work." Oh, I respond, "Wow, tell me what didn't work. I really want to know because I want to make the methodology better. It definitely worked for me. I want to figure out, how it can work for everyone. What did you do for step 1? "Oh, Nir, I didn't do step 1. "Oh, okay. Step 2, tell me about step 2. How'd that go for you?" "Yeah, step 2, I didn't do that. The make time for traction thing. I didn't do that either." And it drove me nuts, right? Here I spent 5 years giving people on a silver platter the solution to their problem that they tell me, is such a terrible problem. The media will tell you, "Oh, insurmountable, can't do anything about it." Here's a solution. I know it works. Try it. And they don't do it. And so that's fascinating to me. What is it between this intention and behavior gap? And I think the answer is beliefs. That all these people I've talked to, when you really get down to it, the reason they don't do what they know they want to do, that they know what to do as well. So they want the benefit, they know the behavior they need to do. What they lack is the belief. It's And we all have this to some degree, this thing that you know what to do, you want the benefit it can give you, but you don't do it. And the reason is that you don't believe. You don't believe it's going to work out. You don't believe you're good enough. You don't believe it's going to be, or maybe you believe it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. You don't want to do it. That's what I'm diving into, is how do we find those empowering beliefs, and how do we shed our limiting beliefs?
I'll pre-order. But thank you very much. Really appreciate, Nir. Thank you for this great conversation. Hopefully people can now be armed with the right framework and tips to become indistractable, on top, of course, of using the Opal app. I'm really looking forward to your next work. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.